This video is going to be about discrimination. This is going to be a really old story. It's about minorities, specifically black people, being discriminated against while trying to hail a taxi in a city such as New York. Now, first of all, there's been studies done to determine if people are being discriminated against by taxi drivers, and the studies determined that there was no racial discrimination against by race for a person being held by a taxi. The problem with the study is that is that the people, I don't remember the proper term, they self-evaluated. So what they would do is they would ask people, have you ever been discriminated against by a taxi driver, and what's your race? And the response rate from blacks and whites was similar. It was like 10% versus 11%. And what was interesting is that I had felt at the time that I was being excessively discriminated against by taxi drivers when I was living in New York City. And it was interesting that it was suddenly in the news. And first of all, I'm a white person. The taxi drivers in New York City are Arabs, Muslims, Indians, Pakistani, Afghan, etc. That's the vast majority of the taxi drivers. Occasionally, like once a year, you're going to meet an American guy. And I said, why are you driving taxis? He says, oh, I love driving taxis. That's what the guy said. Right? I'm going to tell you an interesting story. There was the original checker cab, the last checker cab. I rode in that cab. I remember riding in it. It was red on the inside. He left the newspaper. It had really big seats. Okay, let's move on. So the reason why I was concerned, I was like, I get discriminated all the time by taxis. Why are people saying that black people are discriminated more often? There's no incentive for someone not to pick up someone who's going to pay. I will say that I did witness once a guy drop a woman off, black woman, and an Arab or foreign taxi driver. And the woman got out, started walking away. The taxi driver got out and yelled at her, said, you need to pay me. And he was saying it in broken English. And she said, no. She just kept on walking. She was a big, fat black woman. And he kept on demanding, you need to pay me. And he kept racing after her. And she said, no, because you didn't drop me off on the corner I wanted. And my interpretation was literally, this was not a big street, that she wanted to be on the other side of the street, which was a two-lane road. It was a two-lane road. I don't know if it was another corner. Why would he drop her off on that corner? She got out of the car. Why didn't she go take me to the proper corner? I don't know. But she didn't pay the guy. So I witnessed that. But this is about my own experience sitting in a taxi and being told to get out of the taxi. It's happened to me before. One day, it literally happened twice, 1 mile apart. Got into the taxi. And I don't remember which order it happened in, but maybe he said, where to? And I said, Queens. And he said, oh, no, get out. And he gave me a reason why he was allowed to kick me out, and I said, okay, and I got out. The reason why he wanted to kick me out is because there was traffic, and if we go to Queens, there's going to be heavy traffic. He's not going to earn as much of a fare, and he's not going to get a fare to come back to Manhattan. And people who drive in Manhattan don't know Queens, and they don't know Brooklyn, and they don't like to go outside the city and vice versa. So if you go from borough to borough, you better be going to the airport or something like that. They don't like driving outside their borough. And I knew, okay, it's because of the traffic. He doesn't like the fare. The reason he gave me was a legal reason. I hailed another taxi, probably standing at exactly the same place. Taxi stop, got in. He said, where to? I told him Queens. He said, get out. And he gave me the exact same reason, and I got out of the taxi. Wasn't the first time it happened to me. And then I got into another taxi, and I went to Queens. I had been kicked out of taxis before, all for the same reason. The reason why I was kicked out of the taxis is because I had a Cocker Spaniel, a small dog. And they kicked me out because they didn't want the fare. It's a bad fare to go through the traffic over the bridge, which is going to be stalemated, and they're not going to get money, and they're not going to get a fare on the way back. It's a bad fare. I know that. They have the right to kick me out because I have a dog. They don't have to take a passenger who has a dog in their taxi. That's their right. Okay, I know that's the law. I don't remember how many times I was discriminated against, but I said this belief that only black people are discriminated against by taxis is not true. There is a problem that could lead to discrimination against black people in regards to taxis, or their belief that they're discriminated against, and that is that the taxis are concentrated in Midtown, and black people live uptown. Not uptown, but upper uptown, upper uptown. And when you go there, you're going to see substantially fewer taxis and substantially more black people. And you're going to have difficulty catching a taxi heading back into Midtown. You're the one with the taxi. You're the taxi. Someone else is going to take your taxi out of town. Or he might drive back with nobody. It's going to be difficult catching a taxi if you live in a black neighborhood in Manhattan. It's not because the people are black. And it's not because it's a black neighborhood. It's because people take taxis going to work, going home, which means they're driving around Midtown, going to the big buildings, which is where you're going to get the more taxis. And the neighborhoods where black people live in Upper East Side, you have smaller buildings, more empty lots, less traffic, less people going to the business offices, because these are not wealthy people who are working for consulting firms. These are the people that work at their local restaurant. They have the more local jobs where they work at a restaurant or a bar or a grocery store. They have the local jobs. The retail jobs is what they have. So they're not going to go as far. And they probably don't use taxis. They probably take the subway to save money. And they do have good subway service. And I didn't take the subway probably because I was going to a friend's house that I didn't know the neighborhood yet, so I'm going to take a taxi first. And I'll eventually move to the subway once I figure out the neighborhood, how to get from the subway to his house, how to get from his house to the subway, what the alternate routes are, etc., etc., etc. I remember waiting for like an hour and a half for his subway coming home from his house. So I did take the subway coming back from his place. Yeah, he lived in the black neighborhood and he was not black. So the taxi thing was confusing. We don't know if these studies are valid, but people sometimes say that they're discriminated against, and maybe they're not. I remember that I was hailing a taxi, and the taxi stopped for me, and I was about to open the door, and I looked over, and there was a person standing there that I did not see because he was shorter than the height of the car that he was standing next to. He was a man. Really don't remember much about how old he was or anything like that. And if you watch my videos, you'll know that when I'm a short person, I'm 5'6". Lots of people call me a midget. I'm not offended by it. I don't know how tall he was, but he was shorter than me, and I didn't see him, and the taxi didn't see him. And I have no idea how long he was there. And I said, get in the cab. You know, you take it. Don't worry about it. And that would be an example of where maybe he may have been discriminated against if the taxi driver did not see him, because it would have been extremely easy for him not to be seen as a taxi driver pulled up, even though he was one car length away. Because you don't stand in the street. You know, you stand between the cars when you're hailing a taxi for safety. You don't want to get run over. I'm going to give you another example. I used to meet tons of women when I lived in New York City, all feminists. You know where that ended up, right? So, there was some women, and this woman was really beautiful, and she was arrogant. She was bitchy. And maybe we had just gone skydiving, or maybe, I don't remember what happened. There was an event, there was a lot of people. I think it was skydiving, and we probably went out to a restaurant afterwards, skydiving in New Jersey. And I remember saying, is anybody going downtown? You know, nobody says anything, because I wanted to share a taxi to save money. And I said to this woman, I said, are you going, I said, where are you headed? She said, downtown. And I said, where downtown? She said, all the way. And I was like, what the F does that mean? She's saying that because she doesn't want me to share the taxi with her. That's discrimination, right? But it's not by the taxi driver, it's by a passenger. Even though that she doesn't have to share a taxi with me. She was being really mean to me, and she was discriminating against me because of who I am. You know, I'm short, 5'6". I was thin at the time. I was really good looking. she probably shared the taxi with a woman. It actually happened many times. So I met tons of women, and when it was difficult to get a taxi, they would refuse to share the taxi with me. I do remember a case where I did share a taxi, was with a man and a woman, and maybe there were two women, and the guy in the taxi was insisting and demanding, he was insistent that these women go to his apartment with him. And I was like, this guy, I knew he was weird, but this put him over the top for me to say things like that to these people who didn't want to. You know, it's not appropriate to put someone on the spot in a taxi. Hey, we're approaching my apartment. I want you to go into my apartment with me. It's really, really inappropriate. And they didn't want to go, right? Okay, so I just wanted to address this issue and give my opinion and say that I've been a victim to it happens to people.